Thank you, Arabella. Arabella is my potiki. She's my youngest daughter of 3. It's very nice to have her doing that for me. Thank you. I'm Jane Forrest Waghorn, which we've been discussing is an interesting name to have when I'm this morning having the great pleasure of talking to Emily Perkins and Sue McCauley, 2 of our very finest writers in New Zealand, and we are going to be chatting this morning. The theme of our discussion is turning points. I'm sure that there's some of you that have taken the opportunity to hear Emily and Sue yesterday, and so I'm very lucky and proud to be part of this morning. Where do I begin? I suppose one of the things I really want to acknowledge is that we are discussing Lioness and Landed, but for me, Sue McCauley was one of the first New Zealand authors that I read, because in 1982, she released Other Halves. And it was a bit of a rip-roarer in terms of unsettling my perceptions of New Zealand society. It was the first book I ever read that addressed race issues within New Zealand, and also, my girls were shocked by the cover.
I was shocked by the cover.
Were you?
Didn't bear any resemblance.
Yeah. So I was very delighted that I could find a copy of it, because I'm sure that I had it from the library. Now, Emily this is really exciting. I could just get so impressed by awards, and I'm very proud to be sitting next to Emily, who has written Lioness, which of course won the Jan Medicott Prize for fiction in the New Zealand Book Awards. I should call them by their proper name, the Ockhams. That's right, by the Ockhams. It was just that I was reading my notes and I was amused by the term the Watties Book Prize. I thought that's a while ago, isn't it? It's sort of like
Yes, good while ago.
Yes. So that's really nice, and it's an exciting time of the year for me because I'm such a book award groupie, because the long list's about to come out of the Booker. Anyway, so I'm going to start, I think, by asking you, what I was, in my head, what has been going round and round is this term, turning points. And these books, while vastly different, have some really interesting women as the main protagonists. So I'm just going to ask you first to sort of give us a synopsis and introduction to the women in your book so that we can have a bit of a chat about them. Is that okay?
Totally. Oh, I'll go first, only because Sue's asking me to. Well, kia ora, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jane. It's just such a great delight to be here with Sue McCauley, who is, one of, I remember reading Other Halves vividly, finding it on my mother's bookshelf, and it was this talk of my mother's friend group, and so I just loved that book, and I don't know, the sort of verve of it as much as what it was about. So just want to pay my respects to that too. So in my book, it's narrated by a woman called Therese Thorne, who is in her early 50s, and she's at that particular turning point where she's sort of moving out of what has been maybe a prolonged, almost girlhood, in a way, even though, of course, we don't think of women in their 40s as girls. There's a way in which she's kind of understands herself to be on the threshold of a new time of life. And, we talk about the change as the great sort of metaphor for menopause, but I think she's about to embark on a set of changes that she doesn't yet understand. Like, it's part of the nature of the changes that it's sort of mysterious to her. So she's had she grew up in a, quite sort of, I think they call it in the book, like humble beginnings, and on the book cover. And then she's married into wealth as a very young woman. So now sort of 30 years into her kind of wealthy, privileged life, she's starting to look around her and think, hang on, who have I become? What are the deals I've done to, have this life? And is this really who I am? And is this who I want to be in an ongoing way? So there's sort of changes brewing, I guess, at the start, and the novel explores that.
So,
Landed is about Briar, who I was aiming to write an ordinary woman, but then no one's defined that, so it's very difficult to write. So it was me, basically. As often, I think, in fiction, that's what you're doing. You're stretching yourself out and giving yourself a different name. Anyway, in my writing. I was interested more, I think, even though that sort of exempts me from this panel qualification, in writing about what Rogernomics did to the ordinary people in the kind of middle thing. That was really what I had in my mind when I started. But also, I wanted to write about what happens to an elderly woman. So I did manufacture the story, what there is of it. It's a very light-on story, I have to say, to make these points. I hope that's not clear. I hope that's just something I did and no one notices. So Briar finds her husband kills himself sort of the page before the first page, and she doesn't know why at first, and it appears because he's like the good life which they've been living, and he's rather overspent and left her financially bereft, and she has to really decide what to do with her life. And it's about, do you, at 60-something, rely on your family and your grandchildren, your children, your grandchildren? If you've been mostly a married woman who does little jobs on the side, you almost don't exist. That's what I was interested about. And she's floundering and trying to sort herself out, and where she's going to live seems to be fundamental to what her future will be. That's kind of what it's about.
they're an interesting contrast because your book is, it's set in all sorts of glamorous places, but it's set in Wellington, and with the odd trip to the Wairarapa or to the Marlborough down the Sons. And I think for a lot of us who know those places, at points we laughed out loud, which is also interesting because it is funny. I mean, it's a very funny book.
Gosh, yeah.
And it's also at times extremely uncomfortable. And the same is for Briar, I think, but in a different way, because Briar lives, and this is my question, because this is set in Timaru, and I grew up in Timaru. I feel like I knew Briar. I think I'd been in her house, and I'm 62, so there's a lot of overlap there, and but that's what happens when you read a book, isn't it? Like you would, creating.
I'm
Briar.
delighted to think you know her. That's what I wanted people to know her and feel. Here she lives down the road, or I've met her.
Yeah.
She doesn't have many friends. I've been criticised by reviewers to say, where were her friends? But I'm writing about my generation, although when I wrote the book, because I couldn't get it published for many years, 15 or so, when I wrote it, I was writing about someone somewhat older than me, respectfully, and now I look back and I think that silly young thing.
Yeah. So my next question, really, because they're different in a sense, but Freud said anatomy is destiny. And that is a really old line, but I did keep thinking about it in this. Because Therese doesn't have children of her own. She has had a hysterectomy. You know, so those big physical turning points in a woman's life aren't part of her life. Is that part of what she's facing? Whereas Briar has had, her life has been completely, her turning points have been very much about her children, you know, having two husbands, being a solo mother, you know, them growing up, going away, her grandchildren and her worry about not being a good grandmother, all those sorts of things. So that's my next one. Is it to do with their ability to have babies?
I mean, obviously, I think when you become a parent, it is if not the sort of turning point in a life. And I've got 3 children, and I was really interested in writing a character who hadn't had her own children and actually who wasn't that plagued by it.
Yeah.
I wanted to write a woman who, you know, for her it wasn't a lack or a loss to not be a biological mother. It was just, you know, she was a devoted wife. She was a businesswoman, very successful in terms of creating her own interior design and homewares and soft furnishing company. And she, you know, she's got young women she employs, and her older husband has got children who are actually a lot closer to her age than he is. So although her relationship with them is incredibly uneasy, she's got a very caring role in a lot of people's lives. And one of the things I wanted to explore was how caring, you know, we all need to care for people and we need to be cared for. But I think there are ways in which when it becomes invisible, in that way you're talking about a woman's invisibility, when it just becomes assumed that somebody's going to do it for you, then you are at danger of losing yourself. So that's her relationship to what we might think of as the maternal, if you like. But I definitely wanted to, I mean, I'll read a bit later about sort of becoming a mother and that sort of thing. I definitely wanted to not give her children, but to not have her perceive that as an absence.
Because she's sort of consummate, isn't she, in her whipping up drinks and pouring champagne and making delicious food and being beautiful.
Yeah, she knows how to make it all pleasant for everybody else, and that's how she's justified her existence.
And you want to shout stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about Briar and her relationship with motherhood?
I don't know that I have an answer to that. I was interested in writing from the older parents' viewpoint, because it seemed to me I was reading a heap of novels written by middle-aged writers who, and there was a lot of condemnation of parents or subtle, you know, accusations of this is a lot of my problems lie with you. And I thought I didn't get to read the older parent maybe being a bit critical about their children. And so I was just trying to write the balance there a little bit. But I do find that, you know, my children have lived a long way away most of their lives. And I feel guilty about that. Well, I feel sad about it, I suppose. I would like them to be tucked down in the little batch out there so I could hang out with them more. And I think I'd made decisions. You know, I think as a writer, there's probably a point, maybe some writers just feel I am born to be a writer, but when I had to make choices between my relationships and being a writer, I went for the relationships. And because I had no choice, because that's the kind of person I was, you know. I think that was sort of in my head about Briar. You go for the relationships, but if the relationships collapse, where are you? You know, what we're forced by social conditions is the children a long way away, all this sort of thing. sometimes it feels to me that we're being fragmented. We're against forces we can't change. I don't know, I was just kind of sticking my finger in to see how hot it was, to see how I felt, and hoping people would make some sense of it and react to it or identify.
Briar faces a lot. I mean, her husband kills herself, and then you find out more about her past life, which I suppose I was trying to refer to, of her first husband and coping with being a solo mum, and then choosing a new relationship and managing a blended family. But then she faces the death of her sister and then her brother, which is, I was going to use the word relentless, but it's also what happens as you get older,
Yes.
that you face loss a lot more. So each time there's a loss, there's a choice or no choice. Do you just face it?
I think there's no choice, but I think it's so, it's a force of being old, isn't it? I mean, all your friends are dying. You start to add up. There's more not there than there are there. It's a very disconcerting time. I mean, Briar's just starting into that. But I have to say my normal publishers absolutely hated that. They said, there's all these people die. Well, if they'd been shot around the corner, it would have been just fine and dandy. But, popping off because you're old is not sexy, is it? No. I'm not answering your question.
That's all right. That's all right. It's absolutely fine. But Therese's, I think it's really interesting because Therese is at a point in her life where she can make a choice. And I think the bit where she goes swimming in Oriental Bay, is it Oriental Bay she's in?
Yeah.
And it actually reminded me of the Pip Adam book, The New Animals, where the girl swims out, but she doesn't come back. She just keeps going.
Yeah.
But she does. She makes a choice to come back.
Well, Pip's book was very much in my mind in that section because I think Pip's the most wonderful writer of, to me she's such a great New Zealand writer. And in this section of her book, The New Animals, the character really undergoes a transformation.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm writing within the rules of naturalism and realism, and I'm not going to let myself do that. I so love it in Pip's book when that happens, but that what happens to this woman who has to obey the rules of, the sort of material world that we live in, and she's not ready at that point to leave. She does go back. She's transformed by the swim in the sense that it gives her a sort of fever, which kind of makes certain things reach breaking point. I was very interested in what happened if I had to constrain her within, sort of material realism. I was also interested in all of the obstacles to change, which are, in Therese's case, mostly internal. As you say, there are times when I'm sure different readers with different responses are going, just walk out the door now, or tell them all to, where to put it right now, or whatever. But I was fascinated by the idea of a character who was so invested in pleasing other people that the thought of doing that was just so hard for so long. And I was interested in how small a gesture can have a kind of political charge. So in a way, one of the most dramatic things that happens in the book is when she licks her plate, like in front of her husband.
Or scoffs a pie.
Or scoffs a pie. And these are tiny, tiny acts of resistance and rebellion, and Briar's such an interesting character to me because she resists those adult children, and she sort of does, she's got a lot of inner resistance too, but they look like quiet resistances, I think. But, that's the thrill of fiction in a novel, is that you can put hopefully a lot of sort of emphasis and force on those small actions.
Yes, I thought there was a heading that I read of a review, and it said, what happens when middle-aged women start dancing. And I think that when you're talking about Lioness, somebody inevitably talks about getting in the zone and having a dance.
I felt that Therese was what happened after the end of Briar, the changes that Briar was knocked about by. And this was the next chapter, and I found it quite scary in a way. I found it a bit chilling, and I'd never found your books chilling before.
Do you mean in terms of the money side of things?
Possibly, because it's way out of my terrain. But there was something about her situation. You just felt this sort of little darkness about it. And it was circumstantial, I thought. I thought, this is a new age woman who I don't understand. Incomprehensible, really, to me.
But do you think some of that is about, you're writing about the social changes and economic changes that were happening through Rogernomics, and I absolutely see the world of Lioness as a massive consequence of that, and that was something I was very interested in too. And so I guess that's the idea of a turning point, and then what does it turn into?
Yes, that's what I felt.
So
here we are.
The next, maybe we're at another turning point now.
Yeah, we're in the future that she might fear, I think.
It is, I just was thinking about that. I've been listening to the podcast Juggernaut, which I would highly recommend for the spin-off podcast series, which provides that political background to what you're talking about, the Rogernomics, and then moving into this, which is a sort of a bit later, isn't it? And the consequence on New Zealand society, which is a big question. So we have these very people-pleasing women trying to do the best within their lives and situations, but it's within the context of a social and political world as well, which you can't get away from.
And I think they're both kind of like there's something a bit narcotic about all that money, right, or all of that sort of material comfort, and that they both choose to be blind to, maybe willfully unaware, even though, I mean, in Briar's case, it is more to do with generational expectation. Like you say, she was of the generation of women whose husbands did the finances and all that sort of thing. And Therese is younger and maybe has got less excuse in that way, but also I think it still happens a lot in that world. Her husband's been the sort of money guy, and she's got her own financial independence, but she's very... there's something
it's
just...
a limited independence,
she's seduced by the lifestyle.
Is that because they're women, that they are working within the context of their families or finding ways to do that? I was thinking about Briar giving money to the, looking for donations and doing it on her own, or those sorts of things. And then Briar trying to work out what she wants to actually fill her days with. Like getting her dog, but then having to come back for him because when she goes away, and those sorts of things. Is that what women are driven by, how they connect?
I felt that Briar just suddenly had a vacuum because she hadn't sort of thought through, or she hadn't, she'd done little stuff, but she didn't have a passion outside her family.
I think
just survival, really.
Yeah, but this question of relationship and connection is something that I think, maybe women are more socialised into than men. And I'm actually reading a book at the moment called The Vital Spark. I highly recommend it. It's by a Jungian psychotherapist called Lisa Marciano. It's called The Vital Spark, Unleashing Your Feminine Fire, or something like that. And she talks really well about the way that relationship is so important in life, and it's, caring and community and all those things, but also that there are these other qualities that maybe women aren't as socialised into, or as, brought up to have to do with ruthlessness and maybe selfishness, things that we think of as not nice, but which might be important attributes for living a kind of more actualised life, and a more, a life that is not only in relation to others. So I guess I'm interested in not denying the importance of relationship altogether, because it's hugely important, but also what else can be added into it. And in my book, I think Claire represents more of those kind of, qualities of ruthlessness and selfishness and, kind of she's fighting for herself in a way.
The other thing that's interesting with that is that she's given away all her possessions, and we live in an age where we are constantly being reminded that we've got too much and that we need to declutter. and I always think that it's probably more than just your drawers, and that's okay. I mean, it is what it is in its own. But both these women. Therese does it physically, getting rid of things, and at the very end we know that, and Claire obviously has completely done that. But in a way, Briar's longing to go back to her land is a similar thing, isn't it?
It's going back to a simplicity and security, I think.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
And she does. She goes back with Jimmy, doesn't she?
Yes, it's a compromise, but it's a better version. In my mind, it's a happier ending than the one she was hoping for. Really.
Yeah.
So
it feels right. I mean, it just sort of feels.
I was also trying to incorporate, changing race relations in New Zealand over the time of Briar's lifespan, and I've muddled the maths, so I had to put something in to say that. If you do the sums, and there's always some unpleasant reader who does the sums and gets back to you. I've had this happen before. So she lives a sort of a rather longer time than she should. But.
So that was a turning point in the book, in a sense, that change in society in terms of race relations.
Yeah, I was interested in that, and I was also trying to reflect Briar as the naivety that I felt some of my relations in terms of race relations, the things people would say to us, and how many of my lovely elderly relations would say, well, Pat's lovely, but he's not like the others, is he? We had quite a lot of that, and you think, oh, my God. So I was, trying to reflect that generation's attitude and trying to say, but we're getting better, I suppose,
So I just want to talk about the lions and that metaphor through, just because, particularly for what sticks in my mind and as a turning point, is when down the sounds it just turns into a mess and the lifestyle photographer arrives, and it's sort of like there has been lions feasting on the lawn and there's chop bones and mess and stuff like that. But I didn't know if I was reading too much into it by then, but you know how you go when you start looking for everything. But why lioness? Why is she the lioness? Is Claire the lioness? Are the lionesses only the concrete figures in the flat?
I mean, I was just drawn to it. I think partly where they came from originally for me was in the Greek myth of Atalanta and the golden apples, and I loved children's versions of Greek myths and grew up reading them. And Atalanta and the Golden Apples really stayed with me because she's distracted from winning a race by, her suitor who's received these golden apples from the fates, and he chucks them out into her path and she races off after them, and by being distracted she loses the race to him, which means she has to marry him. And that was the bit I remembered, but when I went back to look at it again, the sort of end of the myth is that on their first night of marriage, they go and they have sex in the temple of one of the goddesses, and different goddesses in different versions, but that's incredibly sacrilegious. And as punishment, she turns them into lions. And when I saw that again, I thought, it's not that bad, really, is it? It's like, wouldn't you quite like to be a lion? Yeah. You would be free of a lot of this sort of nonsense that Therese is kind of shackled with in terms of, her wondering about her own sort of authenticity and sense of self. So, I guess that was the driving force of where the lions came from. And then they just did start sort of appearing in other ways to me in images through the book. And then I suppose there's a way in which the word lioness, to me, has got kind of a different elements, because on the one hand we know what it means, and on the other hand, why do we have language with these feminized endings? Why, when we think of a lion, are we thinking of a male lion? And when we think of, if we want to think of a female lion, we have to use the word lioness, So I didn't want to write a Women's Studies 101 essay on that and put that in the book, but if anyone thinks about it, I'm perfectly happy.
Yeah. But Briar would never be described as a lioness. If she was, is she? What do you think she is then? Do you think she gets stronger through the story? As she
Look,
aids?
I was trying not to, I'd been teaching creative writing, and I'd been teaching turning points and all the concrete things you can talk about. And I'd been working in television further back, and women characters had to be strong. That was the fashion, and proactive, and they decisive, and they drove their own lives. And I thought, this is the last novel I'm going to write, and I don't believe any of that crap. So I'm going to write a book where that doesn't happen, where circumstances push her into things, where, like a lot of us, she's a bit sort of drifting along. She's not doing any of those wonderful, proactive, determined things. She's just kind of a bit ineffectual, because a lot of us are, I thought. So I wrote this book, and I can see why they did turn it down originally, because basically it didn't have much of a story. There was a long, very soggy stretch in the middle that sort of wandered along. But I still thought this is an interesting experiment to see if you can do it without a storyline. Fortunately, at my book launch, which Dannevirke Library kindly did for me, there's a fellow writer I know, and he's a dairy farmer, and he writes and self-publishes these lurid-looking series, which I haven't read, in which, everything happens. People come back from the 16th century or something, and there's wars, and there's sex, and there's everything. So at my book launch, I was able to say to the people, please buy a copy. You can put it on a shelf, and you can say she lives down the road, or she's someone's cousin, or, you can do that. You don't have to read it, because there's not really a story. And I got Corey to stand up, and I said, you want sex, you want stories, you want aliens. He's got it. Go to him. I don't know if he sold any books, but...
I do love this. Can I read a little quote that I found? And it said, I'm quoting you. And it said, I thought, I'm a woman getting increasingly fatter. And she writes about things that are familiar to me, which is Fay Weldon's The Fat Woman's Joke. And that you were writing a route to self-respect. So for Briar, a route to self-respect, which is a turning point for her, isn't it? In a sense. Well, it's beautiful, I think.
It's kind of hard for me to say what I was writing, because it was a bit waffly, But Fay Weldon was so seminal for me.
Yeah.
I read I can remember getting it out of the library in Christchurch. And I thought, well, she lived in New Zealand. She's written a book. I could write this book. It's about things I'm familiar with. It's not terribly wide. We all read blokes up until then. We absolutely admired people like John Updike, and I know they were wonderful. But Fay Weldon just leapt into my heart and thought, you can do it. That was a big deal.
She's so good. I grew up sort of reading her books as well. And I met her once, which was quite exciting, when I was living in London. And somebody introduced us, and they said, I maybe had one book out, and they said, Emily's a writer, or a baby writer. What's some advice you've got for her? And Fay Weldon said, acquire no dependence. And actually, by that stage, it was too late. I had a baby already, but
Well, I had lunch with her once. We did. I wangled us onto a farewell lunch when she was out here. And I said to her, she's quite tough, I said, I don't know that writing is, in the scheme of things, a useful occupation. It doesn't contribute much. I do feel that, how do you justify that as a life? And she said, I can just see you being an ambulance driver and going around saying, I don't think this is worth doing. Maybe I'm not going to.
Did it change the way you felt about it?
No.
I think we better take some time now to hear you read from your books, if that's okay.
Well,
Because, if that's all right.
I'll see if I can find my right bit. This is towards the end of the book, and I hope I don't have to explain too much. Her dog's called Honda, and she's met this young man who he saved her dog when it was nearly killed, and he's staying with her. Honda is waiting in the yard and the door of her house is locked. Briar tries for nonchalance. There is no reason Aaron shouldn't go out. He is not a child. He is not under house arrest. She waits for 90 minutes before inviting Honda to join her for a ride in the car. She drives to the pubs she knows, the one that turns on good cheap meals of fresh fish and chips, and the Irish pub where a band from Christchurch used to play every second Saturday night. Inside the first, she follows psychedelic lights to the windowless chambers where people are hunched over machines like a bunch of harassed typists. No Aaron. Briar backs out. She finds him in the next place she enters. He only registers her presence when she reaches his side. You got me, he makes a rueful face. How was your sick friend? Where did you get the money? 20 cents, his voice on the rise. Just a little 20, it was in my pocket. She doesn't believe him. It's a new sensation, this firm and instant disbelief. She surprises herself. Nor does she want to dig for the truth as she would have before. She can't be bothered. And anyway, in this ugly, jangling room, the world truth has no certain meaning. Aaron has turned back to the machine, his fingers stabbing at a red button. Sorry, Briar, he says, I'll be with you in a moment. Briar remains beside him for more than a moment. Outside on the pub steps, she waits again for quite a few moments. Then she walks to her car and drives home. At 5 o'clock, she locks her doors and draws the curtains closed, and when some 3 hours later he knocks on the back door, she continues to lie on the bed reading. Please, he calls, Briar, it's me. Honda begins to whimper. Shh, goes Briar, and Honda lies down with his nose on his paws and his eyes fixed on Briar. Come on, let me in, please. I'm sorry, Briar. A few minutes pass. Then a couple more taps on the door and some indecipherable muttering. But that's all. After a long silence, Briar creeps over to check, and there's no sign of him. It was easier than she'd thought it would be. But what happens now?
It's great. That's a perfect passage, isn't it? It's just gorgeous. It's that seeing her being strong because you just want to shake him and say, don't do that to her. You should not have done that. But she's also getting stronger,
I suppose
but loving.
she's toughening up.
Yeah,
that
she is toughening up.
But also, I find her attitude to money is just it's quite radical. Like it feels, in that way, I think it's, she's got a lot of strength. It's just, like you were saying about the writing of it, there's a way in which even in passivity, that kind of strength is there. And that's just, she's a fascinating character.
Galen Preston told me she was curmudgeonly, and I love that.
That's a beautiful
I like
word.
that.
It is a good word. May we all be curmudgeonly as we get older. Yes.
exactly.
Emily.
Okay, so this is a little reading about, different perceptions of stages of women's lives, at least. So in this scene, Therese and Claire have gone to sort of escape to Therese's husband's Marlborough house, holiday house, and while they're there having their sort of weekend away, his adult daughter Caroline has turned up with her friends. There's been a sort of double booking, and there's a kind of standoff where these women from quite different sort of worlds and attitudes are facing off against each other, and they've come together finally at the end of one of the days to do one of Claire's big kind of dancing zone-like letting goes, and so they've been sort of got a bit stoned and a bit drunk and had a big dance, and this is the conversation afterwards. Later, as if on some agreed signal, we all wound down, and Claire lowered the music to a background rise and fall. Caroline had flung herself over the back of the couch, her head on the cushions, her upside-down face open. Fern's arms stretched wide in a pose of exultation. Sally, who's very pregnant, doubled over her bump, hands on knees, wheezing, her chin shiny with sweat. Everyone's eyes shone, slowly blinking in that glassy post-zone state. I felt a wild surge of love, even for Caroline, especially for Claire. "What was that?" said Fern. "Did you all feel that?" Caroline said, as if making a discovery, "I should be with my kids." "No, fuck my kids. Christ, I need another drink." The tequila was finished. Fern passed her a golden vial of cannabis oil. "I'm scared of giving birth," said Sally. "You should be. It's much worse than anyone tells you," said Claire. Caroline started laughing, a dark, unhinged laugh. "Really? Think of the worst someone's told you to expect. Multiply it by 10. "I don't want to take drugs, though. Epidurals can harm the baby." "Your funeral." I tried to catch Claire's eye. This was a bit brutal, but she was still out there on the other side of acceptability, kicking up the sand under her blazing sun. It was getting cold, even with the fire. I hauled blankets from the camphor chest in the hallway and handed them round. Caroline was lying on the floor, her head in Fern's lap. Sally wore the blanket around her shoulders, hair wild from the dancing. The image evoked a real campfire, and at the same time, the artful, constructed images of campfire that we would post to the Therese Thorne social media accounts. A kind of self-consciousness of their own beauty had crept back into the way the women held themselves. Only Claire looked apart from it, scrappy and worn, but vital. "So cool if you think about the sacred feminine. We're all represented," said Fern in a musing way. First, she put a hand to her own heart. "Maid," nodding to Sally, Caroline and Claire. "Mama, well, 3 different stages of mothering. Mama to be, mama of small children, and mama of adult children, and," an airy wave in my direction, "crone." I checked behind me. No one else was there. "What is a crone?" said Sally. "Like a hag," I said, feeling the word exhale from my throat in a hot rush of tequila breath. "A hag, a witch. A wise older woman," Claire said, before licking closed the cigarette paper on a joint. "Not so wise," I said.
Yeah. Yes, I quite like the word crone. It's like owning it, isn't it? It's like that whole thing of accepting that as a word that we can, it's like gossip, those sorts of words that it develops some images. What I'm going to do is open the floor now for some questions. I just want to say at this point, Sue is leaving at the close of the session because she has a plane to catch. So I'm going to be quite bossy about the timing so that we can get her away without stress. But please, I've definitely left enough time here for the questions. So please, if you want to ask a question of these wonderful women, then the committee members will whip the microphones to you. Has anybody got a question they'd like to ask? Jackie.
What's she saying? Can't you hear me?
No, it's a question here.
Oh.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to ask both of you, when you write, Emily, you're talking about your characters, like you're interested in how they're going to develop, like they're sort of separate from you. But with you, so is it sort of you that you're writing about?
I was talking to another writer about this recently. I think, because she said she goes out there and she invents a character. I kind of feel like they're all me, but I've stretched them. They're kind of, all this awful plastic stuff that's stretchable, and you reach out. But if I don't kind of channel them through me or my experience, I can't cope.
Yeah, I think it's so weird because they sort of are themselves and the sounds that they make and the things that they think, but it does come from within. And I tend to give them the problems that I feel troubled by. So, and there's a sort of a classic writing tip is that if you're stuck with a piece of work or you don't know what's going to happen in a story or something, give the problem to the character. And I sort of feel like I do that with, just the things that are sort of preoccupying me. The characters are sort of a way of thinking and a way of feeling through those things. So for a long time when I was writing the book, I was just sort of carrying them around with me. And, you find yourself thinking, oh, maybe how would Therese respond or how would Claire respond? And yes, of course it is of me, but there's something about putting it into the form of another human being or created human being that just, it helps expand what seems possible in terms of thinking and feeling.
Cool.
So I'm sitting here with 2 of my 5 sisters, and my question to you is, how many other people have told you that you must have had a telescope on my life?
Not that many, but thank you very much. Actually, after Other Halves was published, quite a number of people, a couple even came and visited us. Someone wrote to me and said, "You've just written our life." And they were coming up north and we were living in Northland, and they did come and see us. And she was an older Pākehā woman, he was a younger. And I often wonder, where are they? Are they still together? But a few people in those situations, obviously they identified with that book because...
Cool. Any other questions? Cool.
Hi, Emily. I was just wondering about the zone. Where did that come from? Like, what did you base that on? And I love the book. I found it very uncomfortable, a lot of the book, but it's raised lots of questions in my mind about all sorts of things, so thank you.
Yeah, oh, good. Well, I hope the book is sort of provocative and pleasurable in equal measure. I think I'm not interested in just like doing that. So that's where the sort of humour comes in, and this idea that you kind of, and I think that's also where the environment of the book comes in too, because I wanted to create these sort of worlds that were pleasurable to walk around in, even if I'm examining them quite closely. But the zone, for me, is just like a site of release. Like it's a way of getting away from convention and expectation, and remembering that you're in a body, remembering that you're, a sort of human animal, and that, we've got just the sheer fact of our physical existence is sometimes enough. And I do think that the women and the people who can sort of have the opportunity to enter it, there's a kind of like the privilege that they've got the time, they've got the place, they've got the availability and all of that sort of stuff to do it. But yeah, to me it just represents physical freedom and how great that is, that there's a joy in just being a body.
Can I ask a question? Do you think that everybody grows away from that? It's something you have when you... 18 or whatever, and then you grow away from it.
Ah, that's such an interesting thing in terms of turning points, because I think that that's part of why we can think of women's lives in terms of turning points maybe more readily than we can think of men's lives, because the turning points are so physical and embodied, and it's so, even though, there's far less that's been investigated about those things medically than there should be, and in terms of health and biology. But, for women, you do undergo all of these different physical changes. So I feel like you're maybe brought back into a sense of the body when around menopause and that kind of thing.
Pressure against, I know, because I do it and it's embarrassing to everybody. Older women who dance when there's music.
Yes.
I see my grandchildren now cringe, but I feel entitled.
Oh, yeah.
But then I realise it's definitely not done.
Well, then maybe that's part of it too with the zones. There needs to be more of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was there one more question there? I've got one wee thing.
There's someone else there.
My question isn't even well formed, but I'm really interested because you are revealing women of a certain era and a certain age, and in a way how beholden they have been or are to men and money and finances. And I'm just wondering if there is a new era, and I just went and listened to Ty Tibble last night, and wow, it's like somehow she inhabits a different space. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I think there's lots of, what do we say, liberated sounds terrible, it's my era. There's lots of women doing their own thing now. I think maybe we've been depressing here. I think there's lots of good stuff happening among and around women. The trouble is, with the old women's lib that I was a great supporter of, down the track, you suddenly realise first there was blokes telling us what to do and not do, and then suddenly there's the most assertive of the women deciding what we should do and not do. And I must say at that point I kind of dipped out and thought, nah.
Yeah, I love the idea of just resisting the word should, no matter where it's coming from.
Yes,
It's a very good love. Thank you very much. That was a great question. Thank you. And they all are. It's hard to ask a question in a group in case, you're halfway through and you're scared you might sound a bit silly. I have asked Sue if at this point to finish, because this represents a turning point in her life. We've talked a little bit about other halves, and it's a famous love story, really, in New Zealand, your love story with Pat. And Pat died last year in December, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sue has very generously agreed to read the poem that she wrote.
I've been carrying around, we printed too many, we overestimated, we printed too many funeral, I don't know what they're called, sheets. So I use them as my bookmarks. I have them everywhere. And it's very nice, because I'll show you, he was so beautifully handsome.
Yes.
But we stuck to the young photos because he would have liked that. But there's a poem I wrote earlier in the year that people persuaded me to put on here. It's called Love Poem. Listen, like me the night is holding its breath. Beside me asleep you shake, vibrate, whatever. More than a tremor, a quake, magnitude 5. Minor damage may occur, precursor of more to come. Dystonia, go Google. Not a country on Russia's border, though as foreign and assailable. Your personal disease or condition, motor neuron spectrum, a circuitry dysfunction, your limbs left to their own devices, disobedient by day, at night these quakes. No solution on offer. Have you tried turning him off at the war? I hold your trembling body in fierce embrace, a battle. My heart versus your discordant mind. My arms are strong with half a century of loving you. On the Richter scale of love, it's a 12 at least. I should have read that, makes me cry. But it was a love story, I'm proud.
Thank you, Sue. I didn't mean to make you cry. Thank you for sharing it.
Oh, thank you, Emily. It's so nice to be on here with Emily.
Isn't
She's
it?
the New Zealand writer I'm most identified with.
Aren't we
Such
lucky?
an honour to me, and I mean, from somebody who's such a groundbreaking New Zealand writer, that's amazing. Yeah,
And what an
thank you, Sue.
honour
Thank
to
you.
have you here, Sue, and what a privilege to share that beautiful.
He would
beautiful-
like that.
Yeah. Thank you. So I would like, Emily will be available. We thought she could sign with two hands and channel Sue, but Sue is now going to vanish like a spirit back north. Thank you, Sue. It's been amazing.
You're silly. No.
And thank you to our beautiful Emily,
That's
knowing
never
that we've
happened
got
before. I don't know whether I'm supposed to stand up or bow or what.
Wow, okay, that's it. We're done. All right.